Hello and welcome. In this episode, I'm going to share encounters with black-eyed children. These stories include a woman who saw a terrifying man in a grocery store and a story involving something I'd never heard of before in a black-eyed children encounter. But first, we start with a story where one woman had an unexpected visitor by her car while leaving the store. Before we get started, I just want to say that a lot of people turn to posting their stories online because they feel like they can't tell anyone and would be seen as crazy if they did. Most people who experience these beings are traumatized and feel the need to unburden themselves, or just have someone who will believe them listen to their story. If you've had an encounter and you feel like you can't tell anyone for fear of being made fun of, ridiculed, called a liar, or any other reason, email me. You'll find a sympathetic ear here who will believe you. I do want to mention that just because you email me your story, it doesn't mean it will end up in an episode on my channel. Your story can stay between me and you if that's what you want. Also, if you've had an encounter and you'd like to come on an episode and tell your story, email me. My email is wolfwhocriedcryptid@gmail.com. Alright, let's get into today's stories. The first story of this episode comes to us from a poster who came out of a store to see a boy standing in front of her car. However, as you'll see, he was no ordinary boy. She never figured out whether it was some prank pulled by a kid with colored contact lenses or a genuine encounter with one of those eerie beings known as black-eyed children. But what happened to her that day remains etched in her memory. The town she'd gone to high school in sprawled across Southern California, neither rural nor a large city, just a stretch of a suburban area with neighborhoods and shopping centers about an hour from San Diego and Los Angeles. It was sometime in her senior year or close to it. She'd been driving for about a year or two at the time. That afternoon, after school let out, she went to CVS on her way home, parking in front of the store. She'd always been cautious, being a small female, worried about being abducted. So when she walked out of the store and saw a young guy with a skateboard standing beside her car, she instinctively braced herself. She didn't recognize him from school and didn't even think she knew anyone who skated. Something about the moment made no sense at all. He stopped and stood at the front of her car. The dents and scratches of that old Accord were nothing to brag about, yet the kid smiled and said, "Nice car," like he meant it. That compliment, however bizarre, made her glance up. And that's when everything stopped. The boy's eyes weren't just shadowed, they were voids, black and endless. No whites in them at all. Just black where black shouldn't be. She wanted to look away, but she couldn't. Stammering a thanks, she went to open her car door, hands jittery on the handle, but the kid didn't move. Instead, he offered to clean it, casually, almost like a favor. "I could wash it for you," he said. She froze. Who says that? In a parking lot. To a stranger. Not responding, she slipped into the driver's seat and shut the door. But the kid didn't budge. He lingered there at the hood, eyes still locked on her, even as she reversed and left. That image, those eyes clung to her. They were completely black. She hoped maybe that it had been some elaborate costume, makeup, contact lenses, anything to explain what she saw. But the truth was she couldn't say for sure. All she knew was what had stared back at her, and what she saw was real. 8 or 9 years had passed, yet that moment returned like clockwork once or twice a year without fail. Each time it felt as vivid as the last. She'd always been wary of people getting too close, and that day triggered every instinct she had ever learned to trust. The boy hadn't been in motion. He hadn't looked busy or hurried. He was just there, still and waiting. That skateboard might have been a prop or maybe a ruse, but it didn't make sense that he would just be loitering by the parked cars. When they'd finally locked eyes, a feeling of dread sank in. Something wasn't right. The depth of those eyes, it felt like she was staring into a bottomless pit. And suddenly, all logic unraveled. Maybe the kid was down on his luck and hoping for work. Maybe the car wash offer was earnest. But even so, she knew instinctively that getting close would have been a mistake. Her skeptical brain tried to rationalize it away, just a strange encounter with an offbeat teen. But deep down, doubt lingered. Hearing stories from others who described similar encounters made her question things she'd brushed aside for years. I'm not sure anyone would be thrilled to see a stranger standing by their car when walking out of a store, much less for that person to be creepy and have completely black eyes. And then to mix into the equation that the original poster is a small female who is wary of strangers anyway, I'm sure that was a nightmare in and of itself. She absolutely did the right thing getting out of there and not interacting further with this boy, or entertaining him any more than she did. There's no telling what he was really up to, and being that he was a black-eyed child, I'd say it wasn't anything good. She listened to her instincts, and they were correct in this situation. I believe they saved her from a truly horrific encounter had she interacted with the boy any further. What do you think about this story? What would you do if you walked out of a store and saw a child with black eyes waiting for you at your car? The next story comes from a poster who encountered a black-eyed man in a grocery store one day. Several years before she posted her story online, she was in a grocery store wrapping up a typical shopping trip. As she headed down the wide central aisle toward the checkout lane, something caught her eye. A man, perhaps in his 60s, stood still ahead of her. His stance was casual, outfit unremarkable. He looked like any other shopper who might have paused to wait for someone near the produce section. But as she drew closer, the ordinary shifted into the strange. He slowly turned his head and met her gaze. What she saw made her breath hitch. His eyes were pitch black, no whites at all, just empty obsidian voids. A cold, suffocating dread slammed into her like a wave. Her instincts flared. She veered sharply right with her cart, bolting down the narrow aisle near the greeting cards. Not walking, running. Real visceral terror gripped her, even though the man never moved a muscle. He simply watched. Shaken but determined, she made it to the front, paid for her groceries in a daze, and left the store without looking back. In her 45 years, she had never encountered anything that churned up such raw fear inside her. And she was no stranger to human interaction, always smiling, the sort who lights up the room with warmth, she says. If he'd seemed ordinary, she'd have offered a friendly hello. But what she saw was off, deeply off. She later scoured the internet for similar experiences, uncovering only fragments of stories. Black-eyed children popped up frequently, but accounts of adults like him were rare. One tale about a man at a roadside rest stop came close, especially the overwhelming dread that the person felt. She ends her post with two questions. Has anyone ever seen anyone else like this? And could it be a condition, a trick of the light, or something else that causes their eyes to appear black? I know no one expects to run into a black-eyed person, but least of all in a grocery store. However, I will say that this isn't the first story I've heard where someone encounters one of these beings in a grocery store. And it isn't the first time I've heard of a black-eyed adult either. I'm pretty sure most people would have had the same reaction to this and gotten out of there as fast as they could have, just like the original poster. I'm sure it's extremely unsettling to see someone with solid black eyes in a normal setting like a grocery store. What do you think about this one? What would you do if you encountered a person like this while out grocery shopping? The final story of this episode comes to us from a poster who had an encounter with black-eyed children unlike anything I've heard before. Not only does he lose consciousness, but they invade his memories. That's right, not his dreams, but his memories. Until that night, he had never heard the term black-eyed children. It was only after encountering them firsthand that the label entered his vocabulary, and not from folklore or fiction, but from a personal, chilling, real encounter. Confused and shaken, he turned to the one tool just about everyone utilizes, Google. What he found left him floored. There were others. Had he not experienced it himself, he might have dismissed the whole phenomenon as an internet-born myth. Besides his girlfriend, the only other person he confided in was his brother, an aficionado of all things eerie, because he knew he'd be met with curiosity, not ridicule. It was his brother who encouraged him to share the story, despite protests that he wasn't a storyteller, just an accountant with a warning. He and his girlfriend lived in a quiet gated community tucked away in southern West Virginia, a place called Glade Springs. It was quaint, secure, and slightly upscale, with about 150 homes, a country club, and a local steakhouse/bar. Anyone could drive through the community during the steakhouse's open hours, but after closing, the gate locked down and every visitor had to be verified by phone. A minor inconvenience, but it kept trouble out, or so he thought. Then came the doorbell. It was just after 3 in the morning when the chime cut through the silence. Jolted awake, he wasn't sure at first if it had been real or a dream. But as he rolled over toward the clock and registered the hour, another ring confirmed it. This was no illusion. A chill ran down his spine. Maybe it was a neighbor who needed help. Still groggy, he stumbled to the door and cracked it open. Thankfully, the iron storm door remained locked. Standing just outside were 2 boys. One maybe 17 years old and the other closer to 10. Both wore hoodies and jeans, faces hidden beneath the shadows. The older kept his head dipped, concealing most of his features, while the younger one, who had shaggy blonde hair, stared silently at the ground. His voice caught when he took in the sight of the 2 boys, and before he could speak, the older one did. His voice was flat and unnatural, according to the original poster, saying that it sounded forced. "Sorry to bother you and your girlfriend," he said, "but we need to come in and use your phone. We've had an accident." Another chill ran up his spine, and his first thought was, how did the boy know his girlfriend was there? His mind began to race. Maybe they saw the cars in the driveway, and it was just a guess. Still, something felt wrong. Everything about these kids felt wrong. He says they didn't feel human at all. He then offered to bring them his phone for them to use on the sidewalk, saying the reception in the house was bad. It was a lie, of course, crafted in the moment, but he wasn't about to let these 2 step foot inside his home. That's when the older boy said, "Well, my brother really needs to use your bathroom," before calling the original poster by his name. He then said, "We have to come in." That's when the original poster's blood ran cold. Then a panic really set in. They knew his name. He began to stammer, his voice shaking, he says, as he asked if he knew them and how they knew his name. That's when the older boy grew rigid, his tone shifting as he became slightly hostile and demanded to be let inside. The original poster tried to back away, apologizing for not being able to help them before starting to close the door. And then their heads snapped up. Their eyes weren't just dark, they were fully black. No whites, no iris, just pure black as he describes it. He was paralyzed by fear the moment he looked into their eyes. His rational mind scrambled for explanations. Maybe they were wearing those freaky contact lenses. Maybe it was just kids pulling a prank. But then the noise came, a piercing, high-frequency ringing like a hearing test, he says, like that high-pitched shrill. And just as that unnatural sound consumed him, the flashbacks began. Suddenly, he was 3 years old again, sitting beneath a chestnut tree in his grandparents' yard, watching his mother gather nuts in a kettle on a brisk autumn day. A memory he cherished, one of warmth and innocence. But in this vision, the boys were there, standing behind his mother, smiling with those all-black eyes. Then everything went black. He awoke on what he calls the mudroom floor, his girlfriend standing over him, concerned, asking what was going on. He had hit his head. There was blood in his hair, but he was otherwise intact. As clarity returned, so did the encounter. Morning light spilled through the windows, and he had never been so grateful to see the sun. He told her everything. She listened, though doubt flickered across her face. But after they searched online and read similar accounts, that doubt began to shift. Something convinced her. Maybe it was his conviction, or maybe she felt the presence too. He didn't know what those things were, only that they weren't from this world. Of that he was certain. He says the lingering thought settled over him that these beings can alter memories. He also says he isn't sure why they chose that specific memory to invade. He says they don't seem to be able to hurt anyone unless they are let into people's homes, and they can get into our minds. Since the night of his encounter, he has felt watched. Every now and then he says he spots them in his periphery. Sometimes his girlfriend's eyes look pitch black when they are out, only for a split second. But the worst thing about the ordeal is his treasured memory under the chestnut tree is now forever tarnished. The warmth was gone, replaced by something sinister. They were real, and they knew how to reach parts of him that he holds closest. I've heard plenty of black-eyed children's stories where they knock on doors at all hours of the night, asking, then demanding to be let inside. But this is the first I've heard where they seem to emit a high-frequency ringing that disables someone. Then on top of that, to invade a memory he held dear. He's right, that is something sinister. I often talk about how cryptids invade our dreams, and being that I believe black-eyed children are demonic in nature, I don't doubt that they can as well. I know for a fact, as I've had my own personal experience, that demons can in fact invade our dreams. It also sounds like these entities have attached themselves to him, being that he sees them on occasion. As for seeing his girlfriend's eyes turn black, that could just be a trick his eyes are playing on him, or perhaps they are affecting him mentally and causing him to see her with black eyes. It also could be paranoia. I could see how a traumatic event like that would have that effect on him. I just hope he's doing better now. What do you think about this one? And what do you think about black-eyed children invading our memories? And that's going to do it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed these stories. If you'd like to hear more stories like these and other types of cryptids, make sure to subscribe to the channel. If you want to send me your story, I'd love to read it. My email is wolfwhocriedcryptid@gmail.com. I will also put my email in the description below. With your permission, I may want to use your story in an episode. Even if you'd prefer I didn't share your story on my channel and just want someone to listen, email me. We can privately talk about your encounter. Also, if you'd like to come on an episode and tell your own story, email me. Please remember to keep it civil in the comment section. No one deserves to be ridiculed whether they believe or not. Thank you for listening. I'll catch you at the next episode.